Leview, we have you up next talking about update rings.
Yeah, thank you. Let's have some fun. So I hope everyone can see my screen. I'm currently showing the Patch My PC Cloud portal, and we're going to talk about update rings. But before we do, I want to set the scene on why update rings were built and introduced in the cloud portal and what issue they solve. Because currently, when you're thinking about adding Win32 apps in Intune, right, you might think, I want to phase this out. I have a lot of devices. I don't want to hit every device at the same time, and I want to phase them out. So you can do that natively with Intune. And the way you can do it is by leveraging availability and deadline. That's an Intune native functionality. And a lot of people use that. And when they come to the Patch My PC Cloud portal, they expect the same functionality, right? But there is a good reason why we introduced update rings. Availability and deadlines can be problematic in certain cases. And here I have an example. I've packaged Google Chrome. I have this Win32 app, and I've configured the following groups. I have my beta group. I have it configured to install as soon as possible. We can see it here. That's the availability. And I have my pilot group. This is set to install a few days later. I think it's 15 days later. And then I have my production group, which is set to install, I'm bad at maths, 22 days later, something like that, or 20 days later. Now, what can happen is there is a bug in Intune. So for instance, if you have a device or a resource, a device or a user that's a member of all of the three groups, you would expect this particular app to install as soon as possible, right? Because it's part of the first beta group. But we can see I referenced it as soon as possible. I didn't give it a specific date. So there is a bug in Intune right now. In the Intune management extension on the client side, it doesn't interpret this correctly. So it will actually install it on that resource in the first group that has an actual date instead of as soon as possible. So that's one thing to keep in mind. It will not install as soon as possible. It will install actually as part of the second group. To resolve that, you can always edit this assignment. And instead of choosing as soon as possible, you can set it to today, for instance. And that would technically translate into a 0-day deployment, right? That's something you can do. But one other thing that can happen is, especially with automation, if you're using a product that automates these assignments and you configure a template within that, whatever product you're using, to always set assignments with 0-day and then 15 days and then 30 days. If the vendor releases a new version, let's say every 10 days, because that automation always packages the new version, and always moves the assignments from N-1 to version N with the template that you set, 0, 15, 30 days, it will always reset those assignments. So if the vendor release frequency is higher than your release schedule, your phased rollout, it's never going to go to potentially to your production loop, right? Because the assignments are always going to be reset. And that's something we try to avoid with update rings, because essentially update rings, they ensure that every single version goes full circle through all of the rings you've configured in the template. And I have before we deploy something, I have a quick diagram here. It's long live Microsoft Paint. Let's assume we have an app, let's say Google Chrome, and we have version 1, right? This version 1 here. And then we have 2 update rings. Ring 1, every assignment under ring 1 should be created immediately because ring 1 has a 0-day delay. But then we have ring 2, and then the assignments under ring 2 should be created when the version 1 becomes 6 days old. So it has a 6-day delay. And this is all fun and games, right? When version 1 is packaged, the assignments under ring 1 are basically created immediately. And then it will have the assignments from ring 2 pending. But what happens if, for instance, let's say a new version of Chrome, version 2, is released in between our rings, right? 3 days later. It's going to be packaged, of course, because the vendor released a new version. And then the assignments from ring 1 are going to be moved, right? Because they have a 0 days delay, they're going to be moved to version 2. Version 1 still has a purpose, not going to be deleted from Intune, but it's not going to have any assignments. And that's fine because it has the assignments pending from ring 2. So if I delete the drawings, it will have these assignments. which should be created when it becomes 6 days old. So when that time passes, once 6 days will pass, version 1 will all of a sudden have the assignments from ring 2, just to ensure that even version 1 goes full circle through all of the rings. And of course, once version 2 will become 6 days old, it will set the assignments, it will move the assignments of ring 2 from version 1 to version 2, right? Because it's version 2's turn to go full circle through all of the rings. And when the ring 2 assignments are moved, version 1 will finally serve no purpose anymore. So unless you have retention enabled, then during the next Patch My PC Cloud sync, version 1 will be cleaned up, right? Because we don't want you to end up with a lot of older versions. So that's how update rings work. And I have a scenario here in my Cloud Portal. If I look at under deployments, I have such a setup. We can see I have AWS command line interface. The vendor releases a new version, I think every 2 or 3 days, sometimes even daily. And we can see the status for this application says scheduled. And if I click on it to learn more information about this particular deployment, I click more info, I can see I have ring 1 configured right here, and it has an assignment to my IT devices. We can see the status for this equals success. It has a 0 days delay, so it was created immediately. But then we also have ring 2, which should go to all devices, and that should be created only when this deployment, after 5 days, basically. And that should be today, because the initial creation date was 24th. I paused the sync. It should be created later today, but I paused it so it wouldn't create it, so I could show you guys this as well. If I check Intune, let's quickly check what we have there. We can see exactly what I mentioned. We have 2 AWS command line interface versions. This is version N, the latest, and then we have version N-1. As I mentioned, N-1 doesn't have any assignments, and that's because the ring 1 with 0 days have been moved to the latest version. If we look at the properties of this app, we'll find that it has the IT-only assignment, the one under ring 1. We confirm that it is the case, indeed, as we specified in the ring, in the update ring. And then, of course, the N-1 is pending to have the assignments from ring 2. Now, I hope that makes sense. I hope that simplifies how update rings work, because they can be confusing at times, although they are quite powerful in how they work. Let's also quickly create an update ring together. So if I want to, let's say, deploy one password. If I go to assignments, of course, I can always create my assignments in any way, shape, or form I want, required assignments, available assignments, update only. But then we also have the option to set up update ring. So if we enable the update rings, 2 rings will be created by default. Of course, you can change the days delay as needed, and you can add additional rings as needed as well. All that's left is to specify some assignments under each ring, and they should be created under each ring. And let's say in ring 1, I want to deploy the update only, and I'm going to deploy it to my IT devices. In this list, by the way, you will find your own Entra ID groups. We just read them, and then you can choose which Entra ID groups you prefer. I'm going to set this to my IT devices, and because I'm deploying it as an update only, it will ensure that Intune will only install the update on devices that have an older version. And then in ring 2, as an example, just for today's webinar, I'm going to say the update only should be deployed to all devices, but I'm going to also say I want to make it available to all users so that people have the latest version available in the company portal. So those users that don't have 1Password installed, they can go there and they can install it if needed. Now, we can also notice that we don't yet have the deploy button available, and that's because we have a final choice to make. We need to choose the update ring start time. So let's quickly discuss about this as well. We have 2 options. The first option is a delayed option, the delayed start time, and the other one is immediate. The only real impact of one of these 2 options is on the version N that we're packaging today. So if you are to choose delayed, the version N that we're packaging in Intune today is going to start following the rings based on the delay that we've configured. So it's going to be packaged with only the assignments from ring 1. And then, of course, ring 2 will have the assignment set 5 days later. And of course, future versions N+1, N+2 will also follow the same template. Now, if I want to deploy it immediate, only difference, as I mentioned, is on version N. And that means all of the assignments under all rings will all be created at the same time. This can be useful in certain situations. Let's say you have never deployed 1Password into your estate, and then your security team comes by and says, we have a critical vulnerability for 1Password. We need to patch that immediately. And that's what you want to do, but you also want to ensure that future versions will basically go through the update rings. You can configure the rings here as needed. You can set it up as immediate. And once you deploy it, the assignments from all rings will be created, but then future versions will follow the rings as according to the days delay template that you configured. So that's, in essence, the difference between delayed and immediate. I can choose delayed and I can click deploy. And now 1Password will be created, will be packaged in Intune. Now, if you work with update rings, right? Because my setup is pretty simple. I have 2 rings with 0 and 5 days, but in a real life scenario, you're likely going to use more rings with more complicated delays. And it's difficult to foresee or forecast how it's going to work. Now, we don't have functionality in the cloud portal yet. We plan to implement something like this in the future, but we do have a script which was written by our very own Ben Whitmore. And this will help you get an update ring forecast. It's linked under the resources in today's webinar, but basically this is how it works. There are some parameters you can adjust. So the first parameter on row 69, you can choose the update frequency. You can estimate how often the vendor releases a new version. We can say 20 days. And then you can choose the number of days you want to forecast off, let's say 37 or 40 days. It doesn't really matter. And then you can start estimating your rings. For instance, for the ring 1, I want to set a 0-day delay, right? The assignment should be created immediately. And then for ring 2, 7 days, ring 3, 14 days. And you can add, if you are using ring 4 or ring 5, you can add the delays there as well. And then all you need to do is just press F5, run the script, and this will generate a local HTML file, which will give you exactly that information. We can see here, we have the update frequency. We are assuming the vendor releases a new version every 20 days. And then we can see what happens. We have the rings with the delay that we pre-configured in our forecast. We can see that during the very initial day, version 1 is packaged to Intune. We can see that ring 1 assignments will be set for version 1. And then 7 days later, the assignments will be set to the assignments under ring 2. And then finally, 14 days later, the assignments will be created for ring 3. But then if you have 20 days later, if we have a new version, version 2, we can see that ring 1 moves to version 2. That's 20 days later. And then, of course, on day 27, we have this information here. This is the day 27. It's going to start adding the assignments from ring 2. And then finally, 34 days later, we have the assignments for ring 3 for version 2. So this is something that will help you with the forecast of update rings. If you haven't used this script, I highly encourage you to use it. It will definitely give you an understanding of when to expect a new version a new ring to be promoted. Now, there is one other thing I would like to quickly mention. What happens if, let's say, something went wrong in between the rings, and how can we stop it? You might need to stop that. And you can. Normally, if you go to a deployment and if you wait for this to load, normally you would have the option to pause the updates. Now, it is important to note that it is not possible to pause the updates if specific deployment status still stays scheduled. And this is on purpose, right? It's not a bug. This is on purpose. When the status still says scheduled, it just means that no version has fully gone through all of the update rings yet. It means it's pending. And at this point, we don't allow you to pause the updates because you might pause them for 10 days, for 20 days, for 30 days. And so we don't know when you will unpause it. And by the time you'll unpause it, it's going to be difficult to predict and estimate what we should do. The vendor might have released 1 version, 2 versions, 3 new versions. So what should we do with the rings in your template? And that adds a lot more complexity. And that's the reason why we don't allow you, for now, to pause the updates for any update rings that haven't gone full circle for at least one version. And if that's the case, the best option would be, at least for now, it would be to just delete the deployment. And that will also clean it up from Intune as well, the Win32 apps. And it will basically just stop it. So that's it for me today.
Awesome. Great stuff. Update rings. Very powerful. Sometimes a mystery if you just demystified it.
Join over 8,000 organizations who trust Patch My PC to keep more than 25 million devices up to date. It's secure, automatic, and built to scale. See for yourself. Book a live demo with a Patch My PC engineer or start your free trial.